Okay, so in this video, we are going to start making API calls from the front end and actually start working with this data. So up until now, we've just been viewing the data. We've used Postman to make some requests, and we want to start using this like we would in a real world application. So we want to render this out in the front end too. So in the last video, I did mention that we would work on the CORS configuration first. And by the way, I got the definition wrong, so sorry about that. It stands for Cross Resource Origin Sharing, and that's not scripting. I think I said scripting in the last video. So instead of showing you how to fix that, what I want to do here is make a request, run into the issue, and then we'll fix it. I feel like you will learn it a lot better when you see exactly where the issue is and why we even need the fix. So what we're going to do in this video here is we are going to create a completely separate application. So we still want this server running, so make sure that we are having port 8000 on here so we can have this API here. And we're going to create a completely different folder and make requests to this API and render that data out in the front end. So we're going to use JavaScript for this. So this is going to replicate something like where I mentioned in the beginning where a friend might want to create a separate application and just use our API. So we're just going to create an application that renders out projects and then gives us the ability to vote on these projects using not Ajax, but we're going to use asynchronous requests for this. And then we're also going to create a login form and use JSON web tokens to log in. So only a user that gets authenticated will be able to actually vote, but other users can see all the projects. So it's not going to be like a full application. We're just showing you how to render this data out and actually work with it. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing is, if you are not familiar with JavaScript, this may be a little bit difficult for you. This is going to be for those of you that might know a little bit of JavaScript and want to start actually working with this data. I thought about using like a front-end framework like React or Vue, but this way, anybody that knows JavaScript can actually follow along here. If you don't, you still could follow along. It just might get a little bit confusing. So let's just go ahead and get started. So next to our dev search project, we are going to create a completely new folder called Frontend. So whatever you want to call it, you can do that. I'm just going to call it Frontend. And this is going to replicate like two different applications on two different servers. So they're side by side next to each other. They're not connected right now. So this is going to replicate our friend making their application. So what I want to do here is go ahead and open up my text editor and make sure this one is not closed out. And go ahead and open up a new window here. So we're going to do new window. So I don't want to close out what we currently have because I need that server still on. And now I want to open up this front end folder here. So we're going to find front end, and there it is. So at this point, it's just an empty folder. So I have my server on and I have this one open. So in here, this is going to be a simple HTML file. So I'm going to create a page called projects-list.html. And we also are going to need to have a JavaScript file, so a JS file. So let's go ahead and just do main.js. So we're going to use this to make the calls, and I do want to add in some styling. So we'll just do main.css. So it's a very simple application. Let's just go ahead and set up our HTML boilerplate. In most text editors, when you start typing in HTML, you should get this option to auto-complete it. If you don't get this option, just go ahead and type all this out. So we need the doc type, the two HTML tags right here, the head tag, which opens and closes right here, and then the body tag. And in here, I do need to link to my JavaScript and CSS, which by default, they're already called main.js and main.css. And I have them in the same directory. So we are connected here. So in this file, let's go ahead and create a section to actually render out our projects here. So the first thing I'm going to do is use a section tag. So it's the same thing like a div here. If you are not familiar with it, we're just going to create a section tag. It's very similar to a div. You could use a div here. And in here, we're just going to do projects-wrapper. So with our JavaScript, instead of actually writing out our code in here, we're going to identify this div right here and then render the data inside of this section wrapper here. So that's all we need here. And I'm just going to go ahead and use a h1 tag, and we're just going to say projects here. So I actually want to open up this project. So we'll just say projects, and that's it. So it's a very simple HTML file. And I just want to open this up here. So I'm going to minimize this. We'll minimize both projects here. And let's go into the front end folder. And let's open up projects list here. So this is all we have here. So this is a static page here. It just gives us the file path. And we just see this right here. So let's go ahead and actually make a call to this API, and I want to make a request and then fix that CORS configuration. So let's go ahead and open up those text editors again, or the two files that we have, and now I want to go into main.js. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that this file is connected. So I want to make sure that in project list, first of all, I like my JavaScript files beneath the body tag. So I like to put it at the end. So I'll put that there. So I just want to make sure that this connection is working. So in main.js, I'm just going to do console.log, and we'll just do hello. And in Python, that's like a print statement. We're just going to see that appear in the console. So if I refresh that and then go into inspect, we should see that right here. So if I refresh it, there we go. We see hello, and it's telling me where it's coming from. And we know that our JavaScript file is connected. So let's go ahead and actually make an API call. So the first thing I want to do is create a function to get my projects here. So let's just do let, and then we're going to do get projects. So we're going to use arrow functions here, and we're going to set that value to this arrow function. And let's just go ahead and make a request here. So for calling our data, we can use different things here. Some people like to use Axios. Some people even like to use jQuery. In here, I'm just going to use the fetch API. So this is another alternative to make these requests. So I also want to get or set a variable for our project's URL. So we'll just do projects URL with a capital U here. And let's just get the API call or the URL that we want to trigger here. So we're going to make a request to this API. So we'll go back in here and just set that in a string value. So now in our fetch call, we're just going to take project's URL here, and we're going to throw that in here. So we first need to set the URL that we're going to make a request to. So with the fetch API, because by default, we're just sending a GET request, this is all we need to make that request. So we actually want to do something with that data that we get back. So we are going to have to set up our promise here. So a promise is just going to be .then underneath the fetch call here. And if you don't know what this is, I'd recommend spending some time learning about this. I don't want to go into the details here. I'm just going to assume that you know a little bit of JavaScript, but a promise is kind of like a response to what just happened here. So it waits for this to finish rendering, I guess, or making the call, and then we get that response. Now, with the fetch API, we do need to convert this to JSON. So we're going to take our response and we're going to convert it to JSON data. So once we convert that response to JSON data, we're going to return back another promise. And this is going to be called data here. So we're going to use another arrow function. So now we have our data in a JSON response. And I just want to console this data out right here. So we're just going to do console.log. So what this data is supposed to be is it's supposed to be all of this right here. So it should be this list of projects or this array of projects in JSON format. So once I have this function ready, we have a successful call. What I want to do is go ahead and trigger this function because it won't get triggered until we actually call it. So we'll just do get projects, and let's go ahead and activate it. So I just saved it, and in the front end, we're actually going to run into an issue right now. So if I refresh it, we're going to get this error. And this doesn't really tell me that much, but if I go to network, if I refresh that again, we're going to see this CORS error right here. So it's telling me that we're trying to make this request, but it's not working. And then if I hover over that, we're going to see cross-origin resources sharing error. So what's happening here is we're trying to make a request to this API, but we're on a completely different server. And this is typically how you would have your API set up. Now, if you're on the same server, it would work just fine. But in this case, we're just trying to imagine that this is our friend trying to make a request to this API. So with the CORS sharing, we can actually set a list of URLs that are allowed to make requests to our API. So we don't want just anybody making requests. We can actually manually set certain URLs or domains and say, okay, these domains have access to call our API, so go ahead and let them. Now, if they don't have access, if we don't have it set up, go ahead and block them. So this way we're not getting malicious attempts. What I'm going to do with my CORS configuration is I'm going to pretend like this is an open API, and I'm going to allow any API to make requests to our endpoints here. So for this, we're going to need to go back into our Django application, and we're going to have to set this up here. So let's go ahead and close all these out. And the first thing I want to look up here is Django CORS. And there's going to be a library that lets us do this. So it should be the first one that comes up. Here's the domain. We're just going to go ahead and pip install Django CORS headers. And we're going to follow this documentation and how to actually set this up. So we'll do this in a second once we get this installation complete. So I'm still going to have my server on. I'm going to open up another terminal. And because of my VS Code setup, I have to do python-m. You probably won't have to do this. And I'm just going to paste this in. So pip install Django CORS headers. We're going to run that installation. And now that is installed. If we go down here, there's different ways that we can actually configure this. So there's a few options here. First of all, we do need to add this into our installed apps here. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go into dev search and then settings.py. And let's go ahead and add this underneath REST framework. So CORS, headers, and then just make sure there's a comma right there so everything's working. And so far, so good. So to actually configure these, we're still going to need to do something in settings.py. So the first thing is I need to add this to our middleware. So we'll copy that. We'll go ahead and go into our middleware here. And we're going to put this just above white noise here. So CORS. Actually, let's see. Does the documentation tell us where to do this? Let's just put this at the very top, just in case. So I'm only taking that top line here. So CORS headers. We have that right there, and we're not grabbing this. I think this is just telling us to do this just for reference and where to add it. So we're not doing that. We're just adding CORS middleware CORS header, or CORS headers middleware CORS middleware. Okay, so for the actual configuration here, we have a few options here. So the first thing is we could use CORS allowed origins, and this is where we would actually create a list of domains that are allowed to access our API. What I want to do here, I actually like using this way right here, by the way. If I'm not making an open API, I like to just tell it exactly what URL is allowed to access our API. But in this case, I'm just going to do CORS allow all origins, and I'm going to set this to true. So that means that it doesn't matter who's making a request to our API, anybody can access it. So I'm going to make it public. But ideally, if you are working with an application and you had one domain to allow here, you would do something like this. And there's documentation on how to do it. So CORS allowed origins, you would make a list and you would say, okay, we can access this by example.com. We can allow this domain and so on. So we're just setting a list of domains that can access this. So what I'm going to do here is use the CORS allow all origins. So I'm going to copy that and I'm just going to bring that down here somewhere by my static file. So I want to do that just above my email configuration. So let's go ahead and do this right here. We'll bring that in here and I'm going to set this to true. So CORS allow all origins, that means allow all domains. So once I set that, I think that's all I need to do for my API here. So that should do it now. So we can also set the methods that are allowed. So if we don't want anybody updating things, there's quite a bit we can actually configure here. So that should be successfully installed. So now if I refresh this, I'm going to go into my console. If I make that refresh, now it's all working. And this URL here, I guess is a file path at this point, but later on that would be a URL. This URL is actually allowed to make that request now. So if I look at that response, look at what we have here. So this is this API call. We obviously don't get all this formatting here. We just get this list of projects. So what's happening here is we're going into our project. We set that URL. So that's the domain or the endpoint to getting the projects here. We make a request here. We convert it into JSON data, and then we just console that and we trigger this function to actually get this. So down here, if I can open up the right folder, actually I need to open up the actual template. So I can actually go in here and I can see that I have 15 projects here. I can open up each one and I can see the details about the project and I can actually start working with this. So now what I want to do is actually render these projects out in my front end. So I made the API call, that's successful. So what I'm going to do is create another function here and I'm going to say build projects. So this is actually going to build out my projects list here. So I'm going to set this to an arrow function. And let's go ahead and trigger this on the response here. So build projects. What we're going to do here is we first want to get this wrapper. So this projects wrapper, we're going to take this right here and we're going to render the data out inside here. So a front-end framework would look a little bit different here, but the idea is still the same. So the first thing I want to do here is find that projects wrapper. So we'll just do projects wrapper. And I'm going to camel case that. So the W is going to be a capital. And then I'm going to use a query selector. So I'm going to get it by ID. So document.get element by ID. So get, and then E and B and I are all capitalized. And we want to get an element on our page. So the entire web page right here is a document. So we're going into this page and we're saying, let's grab an element from this page here and let's grab it by its ID. So I guess I'll do a little bit of JavaScript recap. So we're gonna go ahead and get this element, and we need to set which one we want to find. So in this case, we need to add in a string here, and now we have access to projects wrapper. So if I go ahead and console this, let's just try to go as slow as possible here. I just know that there's gonna be people that don't know JavaScript that are gonna leave me a bad review for not explaining more information, even though this is kind of a prerequisite for this section, but we'll still try to take care of it. So if I refresh that, once we call it, and I just realized that we need to trigger build projects now. So what I'm gonna do here is trigger build projects once this response is called here. So once we get back our data, we're gonna trigger build projects right here. And with JavaScript, I can actually call this function in here. So I don't have to actually wait for that to be fully complete. So let's go ahead and try that again. And here we go. So projects wrapper is that HTML element, and it's highlighting it right here. So when I go over this, we can see it. So we just got that element. Now what I want to do is create a loop and actually take all this data. So we want to pass in the projects into build projects. So in this case, we're going to take data and pass that in as a parameter. So into build projects, we're going to get that data right here. And we want to loop through and actually output everything here. So the first thing is, let's go ahead and actually create the loop here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that right there. And in JavaScript, our loop is going to be a little bit different. So sorry for those of you that are familiar with this, it's going to be a little bit of a recap. So we're going to create a for loop. And in here, the first thing I need to do is set a variable. So I'm just going to do set I, and that's going to be set to 0. So I is going to be equal to 0. And then I'm going to add that semicolon. And then we're going to have to go into our projects array. So this is an array now, not a list. And we're going to set the length here. So we're saying while I is less than our project's length here. So we need to add in an angle bracket. So while it's less than that, let's go ahead and auto increment I. So we're just going to keep looping through for as many projects as we have. So that's our loop here in JavaScript here. And then once we have that, we want to get each object. So we're just going to do project. And this is going to be set to projects. So we're going into the array and we're getting the current index, which is I. So that's going to be the number, and that's going to auto increment on each iteration. So console.log, let's go ahead and console that out. Let's take our project. There's a car outside that keeps locking his door, so sorry about that sound. So now on each iteration, we get back an object. So we get back a project. So as I go over this, we see the array, and then on each iteration, we're seeing the project get consoled out. So I hope that's making sense so far. So we're going into the projects here. And I'm just gonna go ahead and remove that. We'll get rid of that now that I showed you that. What I need to do here is create an HTML element. Now, I know my JavaScript's not gonna be the best here. I'm trying to simplify it here. There's people that really like to actually create JavaScript elements in a different way. In this case, I'm just gonna create a variable called project card, and I'm gonna camel case that. And I'm just gonna write my HTML directly in here. So we're using backticks, those are not quotes. And this is gonna allow us to use template literals. So I think I used these earlier, but if anything, I'll just explain what's going on here. So in here, what I'm going to do is create a div. And it's not going to auto fill for me because this is a string here. It's not just going to be simple HTML. I'm writing HTML in JavaScript. So we're going to create a div here. And inside of this div, let's go ahead and at this point, let's just output a project title. So let's just do P here, close that up here. And we're going to style this in a minute, but using these backticks here, we can actually use our template literal. So I can use the $sign and then curly braces, and I'm just going to do project.title. So let's go ahead and make sure this is working, and then I'll explain what's going on here. So if I refresh this, one thing that I missed here. Okay, so we're looping through all of our projects. We're getting the project object. We're creating an HTML element, which is called project card. We're storing this in a variable. And then after this, what I want to do is go into my projects wrapper. So we're just going to do projects wrapper. So that's camel cased. And then we're just going to do .inner HTML. So we're going into the HTML of this project, and we're going to set the inner HTML. So we're just going to do inner HTML plus equals. So we're just appending the project card. So we'll just do project card. So we're looping through, and on each iteration, we're taking this div and we're going to apply it inside of this project's wrapper. So let's go ahead and save that, and this now should output this. So now if I refresh it, there we go. So we're working with our API and we see all of our projects being output. So we're making that call and we're rendering that. So it kind of replicates what we have in the front end here. In this case, we're just using our template engine, and in here, we're actually calling this API data. And in a completely separate application, we're making that call and we're rendering out all these projects. And we have these projects here numbered 1 through 9. So don't get confused by that naming here, but we have all our projects rendered out. So let's go ahead and style this first. So for the rest of the video, I'm just going to take care of the styling, and in the next video, I'm going to build in a login form, and we're actually going to be able to vote on projects here. So we're going to add in an up and down voting section here, which we'll build in right now. And then in the next section, we'll make post requests. So we'll be able to make those post requests, and only a logged in user can do that. So let's go ahead and for the rest of the video, let's just style this. So if you don't care about the styling, just focus on the elements that we're going to add here. So this is just for testing purposes, but styling always just makes it a lot more fun to build this in. So the first thing I'm going to do here is in this project class here, or this project div, I want to give this a name. So we're going to do project dash card, and actually let's just do dash dash like that. So 2 dashes, and we'll do project card. Now in here, I'm going to create an image tag. So we'll just do image. Let's close that up here. And for the source, let's go ahead and set that inside of our quotes here. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to take this domain. So if you take a look at our projects here, we're not returning back the full domain. If we look at the featured image, I'll zoom in here. If you look at this featured image, we're just doing / and then the actual file path. So I need to add in the domain here. And there's different ways of doing this. You might want to set a variable called like base domain or something like that. But for now, because we're focusing on just rendering this out, we're going to hard code that in. So for the image source, we're going to that file path. And because we used these backticks here, we're going to use template literals. We're just going to go ahead and pass in that variable. In this case, it's going to be project.featured_image. And did I do image or img here? So profile. Okay, so that's the owner. So we want to find the project here. I know it's somewhere here. Okay, so let's go to the very top one, and we're going to owner, tags, reviews, featured image. So I'm going to copy that. So this is what we actually want. So we'll go ahead and add in featured image. And then if I render that out, let's make sure that's working. Let's see, looks like we have an error. Something about this file path is not working. Okay, so let's see, we have a / and then the actual image. Maybe I didn't set this right here. Okay, so I think I found the issue, and that's because I missed this quote here. So if I save that, that was causing an issue and not actually rendering out the picture. So if I refresh that, there we go. So the styling's pretty bad right now. We're just rendering out these big images here. So we'll fix this up in a second, but let's continue. So if we go back in here, after our project image, which will shrink down in a second, I want to create a section for our body and our title here. So let's go ahead and create another div here, and we'll just close that div off here. And this is why when I'm working with the JavaScript here and writing HTML, I have to be careful because those errors will not show up here because it's just reading it as a string. So we're going to create a div here, and then inside of this div, so I'll create some separation. Let's go ahead and create one more div, and this will be the header for all our information. So let's just create that div, and in here, so we have a div inside of a div. Let's just go ahead and give it a class here. And inside of that class, we're going to do card -- header. So this will be the header, and then we'll add in a description here in a second. So in this header, let's go ahead and start styling it from here. So I want to add in the title, so we'll just do H3, close that off here. And in H3, let's add in our project title. So we'll use a $, we'll do project.title. And underneath our title, we're going to use 2 strong tags here. So we'll do strong here. And this is going to be for our actual votes here. So we'll just do strong, and inside of strong, let's go ahead and add in a class here. So inside of this right here, we'll just do class inside of the opening tag, and we'll just do vote dash dash option. So later on, we're going to need to add in something called event handlers to make sure that somebody can vote here. Now, for the actual value here, let's go ahead and add in an up arrow, or let's see, how did I want to do this? I'll do a plus and a minus symbol. So let's just do HTML. I'm going to look up these arrow symbols. So Chipotle.com is a website that I like to use that gives me the hexes for this. So in this case, I want to do a plus and minus symbol. So we'll just take that HTML code right here, and let's just throw that in here. And then I want to copy the strong tag, and I want to paste this down below. And for the next one, I want to use this minus symbol. Okay, so paste that in right here. And that's all we'll do for now. So we'll add in the description. So we have a project card with an image, and then a div that wraps in our header right here. And then we'll add in the body in a second. So if I save this, let's check out what we have here. Let's go ahead and refresh it. We still have that big image, and then we have this plus and minus symbol with the project title. So let's go into CSS and actually style this so it looks good. So I'm going to move this to or close that out here. We'll close out the console, and let's get this styled. So we have a project card, a card header, and then the vote options for our CSS. So let's start with the main contents of our website. So the first thing is I want to add in a body background here. So we'll do body, and then the background color. Let's just go ahead and set this to $. We'll do F8, FA, and then FD. So I also want to make sure that margin by default in our website is set to 0 because I want to manually set these. So this is going to style everything in the body tag. So it's going to set some defaults. Then I want to set our images here. So by default, every image in our website here is going to have the width of 100%. So we'll take care of that. And then let's go ahead and get our projects wrapper. So this part right here. And I just want to make sure that this is centered inside of the website here. So we'll just do projects -- wrapper. Did we use 2 dashes? No, we just did 1. So let's do 2. Let's take that, let's save it. And then that means we have to update that in our JavaScript. So -- like that. So make sure that this was updated, this is updated, and then in our CSS, we do project -- wrapper. So in here, let's just do max -width. We'll set that to 600 px. So 600 pixels. And then I want to center that. So we'll just do margin 0 auto. That's going to center that div. So let's see what we have. So this should fix up these pictures a little bit. So now we have all these pictures with the title. So it's inline, and we centered that. So this is 600 pixels in width. And after that, let's go ahead and continue here. So in our projects wrapper, let's go ahead and set some margin top. So we'll just do margin -top. I want to make sure we have space here. We'll just do 2 EM. That'll create some space. And let's just do border. We'll set a border so we can see each box here. We'll do 1 px solid. So this is the type of border that we have. And then we'll just do £, EAEAEB. So that's a color that I like, and I have that preset. And for the background color of these cards, let's just make this white. So we'll set that to white. And let's add a border radius actually. So if I save this, let's see what we have so far. So now we're seeing this background color here. So we see that we have a background for the entire website. This color might be hard to see, but we can see that this is white here. So that's what I wanted to set. And let's go ahead and add in a border radius. So I want to make sure these corners are more visible. So we'll just do border -radius. And let's set that to 5 px. So 5 pixels. Let's see what that gives us. Okay, so we have, or we should have, some round borders here. So I think that's getting messed up because of the picture, so we'll fix that in a second. So let's go back in here. And the next thing I want to style is going to be the actual project card. So this card right here. So let's get this styled. So the project card, let's just do project -- card. So that's what I called it. Let's make sure the naming is the same. And in here, So what I want to do is actually I want to use grids here. So we can do Flexbox. I like the idea of grids. I feel like I have more control over everything. So if you're not familiar with CSS grids or Flexbox, just follow along. This should be pretty simple to use. So display, the first thing we need to do is make this a grid. So this is just for building out layouts. So display grid, and then we'll just do grid template columns. So grid dash template dash columns. And I want to have 2 columns. So I want this image to be 1 column and then this div right here to be another column. So we're going to do grid template columns, and we can do 1 FR. So that stands for 1 fraction of that entire card. Sorry if I'm losing you here, but just follow along and you'll see what this is going to look like. And then we can do 3 FR. So that means that this div right here is going to take up 3 fractions of the space, and then this image is going to take up 1. So if I save that, before we continue with styling, let's see what that gives us. So if I refresh that, this is what it gave us. So this is 1 fraction, and this right here takes up 3 fractions. So it just gave us that layout and it styled it in line like this. So that's what the grids did for us. And this is also possible with Flexbox. So with grids, I also want to create some spacing here, make sure all this is centered. So let's go ahead and do gap here, and that's going to create spacing. We'll set gap to 2 EM. And I guess what I could do is I can actually move this here. Let's move this to the right. So as I'm actually working on this, and it's really zoomed in for me, so I'm gonna have to minimize this. Let's see how this actually works here. So we're gonna set that gap. So if I save that, refresh it, now we created some spacing. So we have the gap now. I wanna make sure that my items are aligned properly, but we'll do that in a second. In the next one here, I just wanna do margin. Let's see, margin dash top, and let's just do 2 EM. So I want to make sure that these are separate a little bit. So we'll just do 2 EM here. It's not typing here, so 2 EM. We'll create some space. So now there's spacing in between them. And let's just add in some padding to each wrapper too. So we'll just do padding, and this is going to be 1 EM. So I just want to create some space in here. And there we go. So we have padding. If I make that full screen, this is what we have so far. So we just fixed up some spacing issues. Okay, so after that, I want to style the header here. So the header itself, that is inside of this div right here. So I'm actually going to do full screen because that's going to be hard to see. So this header here. So what I want to do here is actually make sure that these up and down arrows are lined up in here. So I want them to the right because I want the description below here. So we'll go back to main.css. And we'll just do card dash dash header. So we'll take that header, and in this header, I'm actually going to use flex now. So we're going to do display flex, and that's just going to set everything in line by default, and it's going to align it to the left. So if we refresh that, now that's in line, and that looks pretty bad here. So after that, I want to make sure that they're centered to horizontally. So we'll just do align items. And this is going to be centered. So if I refresh that, now they're lined up and that looks a lot better. So I also want to create some space here. So we'll just do gap, and this will be 2 EM. Okay, so there we go. That's starting to look a little bit better. So I'm liking what that looks like. We have our header complete. So let's actually add in the project description. So let's go back into our JavaScript, and just underneath our card header, let's go ahead and create some body data here. So inside of this div, but underneath the header div, let's create some space here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to output what the vote count is. So we'll use an I tag here, and we'll just do inside of our template literals here, we'll just do project.vote_ratio. And we'll just do %. So that's a percentage of positive feedback. So we'll just do positive feedback. Okay, so that's all we need there. And then we want to output the actual description. So we'll do in a paragraph tag, close that up here. And that needs to be a lowercase paragraph tag. Let's just go ahead and do project.description. So we'll add the description. And for this, instead of outputting the entire description, I want to trim it so we can actually do substring. And we need to remove that N right there. So substring, that's a function that we can use. And we just want characters from 0 to 150. So we want the first 150 characters. So that should handle that for us. So let's see what that gives us. So here we go. We see percentage of positive feedback. So we can actually see this percentage. So this is going to replicate what we're doing here. So we get that vote count in this case, but right now we just want to output the percentage. So let's close this up right here. And I just want to make sure that this is in line here. So you notice how the picture is really high up here and then the description is down here. For this, I can actually go into my grid here. So we'll go back to the project card and I can do the same thing here, which we did with the card header, and we're going to align things horizontally. So we'll do align items and we're going to set that to center. So if I refresh that, there we go. So that looks a little bit better. So I just want to finish this up with a little bit more styling here. So we just want to make sure that the text looks different here. So let's go ahead and go into project card and we're going to paste that down here, close that up here. And we just want to style all the paragraph tags here. So we'll just go ahead and do project card P. So that's going to style the paragraph tags and we're just going to do color. And that's going to be, let's see, we'll do a pound symbol. I have a preset value. We'll just do 737373. So that's going to give us a gray color. So I'll zoom out a little bit and let's just remove projects right there. So I don't want that anymore. And what I also want to do is make sure that when I hover over these, I get like a cursor pointer. So a user knows to click on these. So we'll just get this styled here. So let's go into project list. I'll get rid of projects, save that. And we'll go back into our CSS. So we should have just got rid of the project here. So this is all we have at this point. We'll go back into our CSS and we need to get this by the vote option. So we're going to take this class right here, paste this down here. So we'll just do the dot here and then we'll do vote option and let's set the font size. So I want to make this bigger. That'll be 24 pixels. And let's see, we'll do the color here. And I'm just going to make this the same as this color here as the text. So we'll do pound symbol and then paste that in. And then cursor, we'll set that to pointer. So cursor, and that's going to be pointer. Okay, so we have that. And if I go ahead and refresh this, that looks a little bit better. So I also want to make sure that when I hover over, they actually change colors here. So let's go back into the vote option. So I can actually take this entire styling. Let's remove all of this. And I'm just going to do colon here. So colon and then hover. So this is going to be the styling for the hover. And for this color, we're just going to do pound symbol. Actually, I need to write in color. Pound symbol and then 000. So that should give us black here. So there we go. That looks a little bit better. So if I refresh that and hover over this, still not showing up. Let's see what's going on here. So vote option on hover. I think that needs to be lined up. There we go. So that there can't be space there. Okay, so there we go. So it's kind of hard to see, but that turns black and we have our basic styling. So the whole purpose of this was not to make this look beautiful. I just wanted to show you how to render this, but that's it for this video. I guess we could make this responsive here, but once we make it responsive, that's gonna be it. In the next video, we're gonna move on to making post requests. So when we click on this, we're actually gonna see the vote change. All these projects will be updated. So we'll see this percentage shift and we're gonna re-render data. So now we wanna make post requests before we handle logging in here. So really quick, just to make this responsive, right now we're set at 600 pixels. I guess that actually works just fine here. So never mind, it's already by default responsive because I use max width. So let's go ahead and take care of voting in the next video.